The day my family opened my grandmother's final letter, I expected tears, I expected memories. I never expected to hear my own name followed by the word thief. My cousin Vanessa stood in the middle of my grandmother's living room, holding a folder full of documents. She looked at everyone and said, "Before Claire receives anything, this family deserves to know what she's been hiding." Everyone turned toward me, my uncle, my relatives, people I had known my entire life. For 4 years, I was the one who answered Grandma Eleanor's calls at midnight. The one who fixed the old house when nobody else visited. The one who sat beside her when she was afraid of being forgotten. But in less than 5 minutes, Vanessa turned every one of those moments into evidence against me. The checks Eleanor wrote me, the bank transfers, the legal papers with my name on them. They were all real. That was the terrifying part. The evidence was real. The accusation wasn't. And the only person who knew why was no longer alive to explain it. At least, that was what my family believed. Because before my grandmother passed away, she prepared one final story. Not for the newspaper, not for the public. For us. Her lawyer reached into his briefcase and placed an old sealed envelope on the table. Across the front were 6 words, written in Eleanor's handwriting. Open when they stopped trusting Claire. Nobody spoke. Because suddenly, we all understood something. My grandmother didn't leave behind a defense. She left behind an investigation. And the people demanding the truth were about to regret finding it. Before that letter existed, before my own family sat across from me like I was a stranger, you need to understand who Eleanor Whitmore was, because my grandmother was not the kind of woman anyone controlled. Not me, not my uncle, not even time. For almost 40 years, Eleanor ran the Charleston Harbor Journal, a small local newspaper that most people thought should have disappeared decades ago. But Grandma never measured success by size. She measured it by impact. She used to say, "A small newspaper can still tell a story big enough to change a town." And she proved it. She wrote about families who lost everything after hurricanes, small businesses fighting to survive, veterans nobody remembered, people whose names never appeared anywhere else. She believed every person deserved to have their story recorded. Maybe that was why she understood me better than anyone, because in my family, I was easy to overlook. My cousin Vanessa was not. Vanessa Whitmore entered every room like she already knew where the cameras were. She built a career helping wealthy families and companies protect their public image. She knew exactly what words to say, what clothes to wear, when to smile, when to look concerned. Everyone called her the natural continuation of Grandma's legacy. She has Eleanor's confidence. She understands influence. She knows how the world works. I heard those sentences my entire life. And maybe they were right. Vanessa knew how the world worked. I just knew how people worked. I became a history teacher because I love stories too. Not the kind printed on front pages, the quiet ones. The student who finally raised his hand after months of being afraid. The child who kept an old family photo because it was the only thing connecting him to someone he lost. The little moments most people ignored. Grandma understood that. Vanessa never did. The change started 4 years before Eleanor passed. At first, it was small things. A missed appointment, a forgotten password, a stack of unopened mail sitting on her kitchen counter. When Uncle Richard found out, his answer was simple. "Mom needs to sell the house," Vanessa agreed. "It's too much responsibility for her." But Grandma looked around the old house filled with newspapers, photographs, handwritten notes, and 70 years of memories. Then she looked at me. "They think I live inside a building," she touched the wall beside her. "They don't understand I live inside the stories." So I helped her stay. Not because anyone asked me to, because she asked me. Every Wednesday after school, I drove across town. We organized old newspaper archives, labeled photographs, recorded interviews about stories she never published. She called it the Memory Project. I thought it was just a way for her to preserve the past. I didn't know she was also documenting the present. The strange thing was, Grandma never complained about the family members who stopped visiting. She never said, "Vanessa only comes when there is an event." She never said, "Richard only calls when he wants something signed." She noticed. But she stayed quiet. That was Eleanor. She believed people eventually revealed themselves. One evening, almost a year before she passed, I found her sitting in the old newsroom behind the house. The lights were off. Only the desk lamp beside her typewriter was glowing. "Grandma," she quickly closed the folder in front of her. Too quickly, I noticed, but I didn't ask. She smiled. "You always were too polite for your own good, Claire." "What does that mean?" "It means one day someone will mistake your kindness for weakness." I laughed. "Sounds dramatic." She didn't. She just looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Promise me something." "What?" "If there ever comes a day when people you love tell a story about you that you don't recognize." She placed her hand over mine. "Don't start believing it just because they say it louder." At the time, I thought she was giving me life advice. I didn't know she was warning me, because 1 year later, the same family who barely visited her would stand inside her house, hold up documents with my name on them, and convince everyone that the person who loved Eleanor most had been using her all along. The hardest thing about losing someone like Eleanor Whitmore was not the silence she left behind. It was watching everyone else decide what her life meant after she was gone. At the funeral, people filled the church until there were no empty seats. Former employees, readers, families she had helped. People who still kept newspaper articles she wrote 30 years ago because those words changed their lives. Everyone had a story about my grandmother, but strangely, the people who spoke the most were the ones who had been around the least. Vanessa stood at the front of the church wearing a black designer dress and Eleanor's pearl earrings. I noticed them immediately, not because I wanted them, because I remembered Grandma telling me she never wore those earrings unless Grandpa was with her. After he passed, she kept them in a small blue box beside their wedding photo. "They belonged to a chapter of my life that already ended," she once told me. So seeing them on Vanessa felt strange. But grief makes you question yourself, not other people. Vanessa gave the final speech, and honestly, it was beautiful. That was the painful part. She talked about Eleanor's courage, her honesty, her dedication to truth. Everyone cried, even me. Because Vanessa knew how to tell a story. She just didn't always know how to live one. After the service, she hugged me. "I know this must be hard for you, Claire." For a second, I thought we were finally just family. Then she whispered, "I hope you understand that Grandma's legacy is bigger than whoever spent the most time with her at the end." I stepped back. "What does that mean?" She smiled sadly, like she felt sorry for me. That expression hurt more than anger. "You'll understand soon." I didn't. Not until 2 weeks later, when Eleanor's attorney, Thomas Bell, called the family together. I walked into my grandmother's house expecting memories. Instead, I walked into a trial. Vanessa had arrived early. She was sitting beside Uncle Richard with a folder already prepared. "That should have warned me. Before we discuss anything," she said, "there's something this family deserves to know." Mr. Bell frowned. "Vanessa, this is not the appropriate—" "No," she interrupted. "For once, someone needs to stop protecting Claire." Everyone looked at me. My stomach tightened. Protecting me from what? Vanessa opened the folder. The first page was a copy of a check. $5,000. Written from Eleanor's account. To me. Then another. And another. The room became painfully quiet. "These transfers started almost 3 years ago," Vanessa said, right around the time Claire became Grandma's primary helper. My uncle picked up the papers. His expression changed as he read. "Claire," the disappointment in his voice hurt immediately. "Because anger gives you something to fight. Disappointment makes you feel like you already lost." "You think I took money from Grandma?" "I think," Vanessa answered carefully, "that an elderly woman living alone became dependent on one person." The sentence was perfectly built. Not an accusation, not technically, something worse, a suggestion. Enough for everyone else to finish the story themselves. I shook my head. "She gave me those checks for a reason." "Then explain." I opened my mouth and stopped. Because I had promised Eleanor. A year earlier, when the newspaper was nearly gone. When unpaid bills covered her desk. When she discovered Richard was secretly negotiating with developers to sell the building. Grandma asked me for help, not for herself. For the employees who had worked there their entire lives. The checks weren't payments, they were reimbursements. Money I had already spent keeping her newspaper alive. But Eleanor made me promise not to tell anyone until she was ready, because she still hoped her family would choose the right thing without being embarrassed into it. Even after everything, she protected them, so standing in that room, I hesitated. And hesitation looked like guilt. Vanessa saw it. You can't explain it, can you? That's not fair. What isn't fair, she said, her voice cracking at exactly the right moment, is that Grandma spent her final years surrounded by someone who may have been using her. May have been. Those 3 words destroyed me, because people hear what comes after, not the uncertainty before. My relatives started whispering, questions became assumptions became facts. Within minutes, 4 years of love turned into a strategy. Every visit became suspicious. Every phone call became manipulation. Every sacrifice became an investment. Then Uncle Richard said the words I never expected. Maybe Vanessa is right. I looked at him. What? I'm not saying you meant to hurt Mom. That was always how people started before saying something cruel. But maybe you got too involved. Too involved. I drove Eleanor home from appointments. I sat with her when storms scared her. I listened when she cried because she felt everyone was moving on without her. And now that was the problem. I cared too much. Vanessa closed the folder. I think until we understand what really happened, Claire shouldn't have access to anything connected to Grandma's estate. Nobody argued. Not one person. That was the moment I understood something. The truth does not always lose because people believe lies. Sometimes it loses because lies are easier. I walked out of Eleanor's house that afternoon carrying nothing. Not the old photos we organized. Not the books she promised me. Not even the coffee mug she kept beside her typewriter. For the first time in years, I drove away without knowing when I would come back. 3 days later, I received a call from Mr. Bell. His voice sounded different, not sad, not surprised, prepared. Claire, I need you to come to my office. Why? A pause. Because your grandmother left instructions. My hands froze around the phone. What instructions? He took a breath, the kind she hoped we would never need. For the next 3 days, I did something I had not done in 4 years. Nothing. I didn't drive to Eleanor's house after school. I didn't stop by the old newsroom. I didn't pick up her favorite tea from the little shop on King Street. For the first time in years, there was nowhere I was needed. And somehow, that hurt more than being accused. Because when someone questions your actions, you can defend them. But when someone questions your intentions, they take the memories too. I kept replaying that afternoon. The way everyone looked at me, the silence. That was the part I couldn't forget. Not Vanessa's accusation. I expected Vanessa to protect the family image. That was who she was. But everyone else? The people who knew me? The people who watched Eleanor call me before anyone else? They needed less than 10 minutes to reconsider 4 years. Maybe that was what hurt Grandma the most before she passed. Not being forgotten. Realizing how quickly people could rewrite someone they claimed to love. On Friday afternoon, I finally answered Mr. Bell's calls. His office was above an old bookstore downtown, exactly the kind of place Eleanor loved. When I walked inside, he wasn't sitting behind his desk like a lawyer. He was sitting at the small coffee table near the window, like a friend about to deliver bad news. Claire, I sat across from him. If this is about convincing me to fight the family, I can't. He looked surprised. Why not? Because Grandma hated fighting. No. He shook his head. Eleanor hated pointless fighting. A small smile appeared. She built an entire career fighting when something mattered. For a moment, I almost smiled too. Because he was right. My grandmother once spent 6 months investigating why a local factory was dumping waste into a river. She received threats. Lost advertisers. People told her to stop. She didn't. When the truth came out, she kept the first angry letter someone sent her. She framed it. I asked her why. She said, because that was the first moment I knew I was asking the right questions. Mr. Bell reached into his drawer, then placed a small envelope on the table. My name was written across the front. Claire, just Claire. In Grandma's handwriting, my throat tightened. When did she write this? 8 months ago. 8 months. Before she got weaker. Before the hospital visits. Before any of us thought we were running out of time. She knew. Mr. Bell didn't answer immediately. She suspected. Suspected what? He looked at the envelope. That the people fighting over her legacy didn't understand what her legacy actually was. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. Grandma always wrote short letters. She said too many words gave people places to hide. Claire, if Thomas is giving you this, then something happened exactly the way I was afraid it would. First, stop apologizing. I know you. You are probably sitting there wondering what you could have done differently. Nothing. Sometimes people decide what they want to believe before they ever see evidence. The truth has to catch up. Let it. I read that line 3 times. The truth has to catch up. Let it. There was another sentence underneath. Ask Thomas about the final edition. I looked up. The final edition? Mr. Bell stood and walked toward a locked cabinet. From inside, he removed a thick gray box. Not the wooden box from the family meeting. Something else. An archive box. The kind Grandma used for newspaper records. Across the top were 3 typed words, unfinished stories file. My heart started beating faster. What is this? Mr. Bell rested his hand on the box. Your grandmother's last project. The memory project? He shook his head. That was only part of it. I stared at him. What was the other part? He hesitated. And that hesitation scared me, because Thomas Bell had known my grandmother for 30 years. If something surprised him, it had to be serious. Eleanor started noticing things about 18 months ago. What things? Missing records. Financial questions. Documents being requested that didn't make sense. My stomach tightened. You mean the checks? No. He looked directly at me. The checks were the distraction. I went quiet, because suddenly I understood. Everyone was looking at me because of the money Eleanor gave me, exactly where someone wanted them to look. Mr. Bell opened the box. Inside were folders, dozens of them, dates, names, notes, just like every investigation Eleanor had ever done. Except this time. The names were familiar. Her own family. I stepped back. No. Claire? She wouldn't investigate her own family. The second I said it, I knew I was wrong. Of course she would. Because Eleanor believed the truth mattered most when it hurt. I picked up the first folder. Inside were emails, property documents, copies of contracts. But one photograph caught my attention. It was a picture of the old newspaper archive room. Except something was wrong. The shelves behind Grandma were almost empty. Thousands of original photographs and documents that had been there for decades were gone. I looked at Mr. Bell. Where are they? His expression changed. I was hoping you could tell me. A cold feeling moved through me, because for the first time, I realized something. My family wasn't fighting because of what Grandma left behind. They were fighting because of what had disappeared before she was gone. For a long time, I just stared at that photograph. Empty shelves, empty boxes, empty spaces where pieces of my grandmother's life used to be. I knew that archive room better than almost anyone, because Eleanor and I had spent hundreds of hours inside it. Every drawer had a story, every photograph had a name, every handwritten note mattered. Grandma kept everything. A thank you card from a little girl whose missing dog she helped find in 1983. A photograph of the first Black-owned business she featured when other newspapers ignored it. Letters from strangers who said her words made them feel seen. To most people, it was just old paper. To Eleanor, it was proof that ordinary lives mattered. When was this taken? I asked. Mr. Bell looked at the date. 6 months before she passed. I shook my head. That's impossible. I was there 2 weeks before that. The room was full. I know. Then where did everything go? He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me another folder. Inside was a contract. At the top was the name of a private media company I recognized. They created documentaries, historical collections, online archives. At first, it looked harmless. Then I saw the signature line, my grandmother's name, Eleanor Whitmore. My stomach dropped. No. Mr. Bell watched me carefully. What? She didn't sign this. How do you know? I pointed at the bottom of the page. Because she hated being called Eleanor M. Whitmore. He looked confused. That was her legal name. Yes. I smiled sadly. But Grandpa was the only person who called her Eleanor May. After he passed away, she stopped using it. She told me, That name belongs to him. Every article, every letter, every legal paper. She signed Eleanor Whitmore, never Eleanor M. Whitmore. Not once. Mr. Bell slowly took the contract back. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked angry, not surprised. Angry. She noticed too. What? He opened another folder. Inside were Grandma's notes. Her familiar handwriting filled the pages. Dates, questions, observations. She had been investigating the contract herself. One sentence was circled 3 times. Someone is selling my history while pretending to protect my legacy. I sat down, because suddenly the accusation against me made sense. The checks, the rumors, the questions about my intentions. They were never the real story. They were noise, something loud enough that nobody looked somewhere else. Who signed it? I asked. Mr. Bell was quiet, too quiet. Thomas, he sighed. We don't have enough proof yet. But Grandma knew. Eleanor had suspicions. About Vanessa, I expected him to agree. He didn't. And that scared me. Claire? What? Your grandmother never believed this was only one person. I went still. What does that mean? He opened the final folder. Inside were printed emails, family emails, messages about selling the newspaper building, closing the scholarship fund, changing the purpose of Eleanor's foundation. My Uncle Richard's name appeared again and again. My heart sank. No. Mr. Bell said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Richard wasn't stealing. Not exactly. That would have been easier. He was trying to erase everything Eleanor built because he believed he was saving it. The newspaper was losing money. The building was expensive. The foundation needed funding. He convinced himself that selling pieces of the past was necessary to protect the future. And Vanessa? She knew how to make that decision look beautiful. A new brand. A modern vision. A fresh beginning. All the words people use when they don't want to admit something is ending. But why blame me? I whispered. Mr. Bell looked down. Because Eleanor changed her final instructions. When? 2 months before she passed. And she removed control from Richard. My chest tightened. And gave it to me. He nodded. Suddenly everything made sense. The anger, the accusations. The way Vanessa looked at me like I had stolen something. Because in her mind, I had. Not money, not property. Something worse. I had taken the one thing she wanted. Eleanor's trust. That evening, I went back to Grandma's house for the first time since the accusation. It felt different. Quieter. Like the house itself was waiting. I walked into the old newsroom. Dust covered the desks. The printing machines sat silent. But Grandma's typewriter was still there. I sat in front of it. For years I watched her put paper into that machine. I used to ask, why don't you just use a computer? She always smiled. Because computers let people delete too easily. I never understood what she meant, until that night. Inside the typewriter case was something I had never noticed. A small compartment. And inside, one final envelope. My name was written on it. Claire. My hands shook as I opened it. There were only 2 sentences. I know you found the missing pieces. Now find out who was afraid of the story they told. Underneath was a key. Not to the house, not to a safety deposit box. To the one place nobody had searched, the newspaper basement. Where Eleanor stored every story she was never ready to publish, including her own. The basement of the Charleston Harbor Journal had always been the one place Grandma told me not to organize. That should have been my first clue. Because Eleanor Whitmore organized everything. Her kitchen spices were alphabetized. Her newspaper files were labeled by year, topic, and importance. She even had a folder called Things Claire Will Eventually Ask Me About. I found it after she passed. Inside was a list of family recipes, old stories, and instructions on how to fix the coffee machine in the newsroom. That was Grandma, prepared for everything. So when she told me, leave the basement messy, some things need to stay where I put them. I thought she was being sentimental. I was wrong. She was protecting evidence. The key opened an old storage room behind the printing equipment. The light flickered when I turned it on. For a second, it looked abandoned. Then I saw them. Boxes. Hundreds of them. All labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. The missing archives. The photographs. The letters. The original newspapers. Everything we thought had disappeared. She had moved them herself. She didn't lose her history. She hid it. Because she knew someone was trying to take control of it. In the center of the room was one box with a red label. Final edition. Inside was not one story. It was several. Copies of contracts, emails, financial records, personal notes. But what hurt most was the last folder. Vanessa. I sat on the floor for almost 20 minutes before opening it. Because despite everything, part of me still hoped Grandma was wrong. She wasn't. The truth was not that Vanessa hated Eleanor. That would have been simple. The truth was worse. Vanessa loved the idea of Eleanor. The famous journalist, the respected woman, the family name, the reputation. But she never had patience for the actual person. The aging grandmother who needed help carrying groceries. The lonely woman who wanted someone to sit and drink tea with her. The person behind the legacy. Inside the folder was a letter Grandma had written but never sent. Vanessa, I spent my career writing about people who wanted credit for work they never did. I never thought one of those stories would happen inside my own family. That sentence broke my heart. Not because Grandma was angry, because she was disappointed. The records showed Vanessa had been negotiating a deal to turn Eleanor's archives into a commercial project. Documentaries, licensing, speaking events, a complete rebranding of the Whitmore name. And she planned to present herself as the person carrying it forward. There was just one problem. Eleanor had already chosen someone else. Not because I was smarter, not because I was more successful, because I understood something Vanessa didn't. A legacy is not something you inherit. It is something you continue. 2 weeks later, the family gathered again. Same house, same people, but everything felt different. Vanessa arrived confident. She always did. I hope this isn't another attempt to make Claire look like a victim. I almost laughed. Because for the first time, I didn't feel like one. Mr. Bell placed the final edition box on the table. Vanessa looked at it. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty. Where did you find that? Nobody had told her what was inside, but she recognized it. That told us enough. Mr. Bell opened the documents, one by one. The room became quieter with every page. The unauthorized contracts, the plans for the foundation, the attempts to remove Eleanor's original mission. Then came the emails. Vanessa didn't deny them, she explained them. That was somehow worse. You're all acting like I destroyed something, her voice shook. I was trying to save it. Nobody answered, so she continued. Do you know what happens to old newspapers? They disappear. People forget. I was making sure Eleanor mattered. I finally spoke. No. Everyone turned toward me. You were making sure everyone knew you mattered. That landed. Because it was the truth neither of us wanted to say. For a moment, Vanessa wasn't the polished woman from interviews. She was just my cousin. The girl who spent her whole life trying to be the next Eleanor Whitmore. I spent years trying to become her. Her voice cracked. And she chose you. I shook my head. She didn't choose me over you. She chose the person who listened. That was the difference. Vanessa wanted Eleanor's name. I wanted Eleanor's stories. Uncle Richard sat silently through most of it. Then Mr. Bell showed the last document. The one that hurt him, a letter addressed to him. Richard, I know you think selling everything is practical. I know you believe memories do not pay bills. But remember something. When your father and I started this newspaper, we had nothing. The building was not valuable because it was worth money. It was valuable because people trusted what happened inside it. Please do not become so focused on saving the name that you lose the reason people respected it, Richard cried, quietly. I had never seen my uncle cry, not even at the funeral. I thought I was helping, he whispered. And maybe he did. That was the painful part. Some damage is done by people who think they are doing the right thing. The consequences came slowly, not dramatically, not all at once. Vanessa lost the media deal. Not because I ruined her, because when the company learned Eleanor had never approved it, they walked away. Her carefully built image cracked. And for someone like Vanessa, that hurt more than money. Richard stepped away from controlling the foundation. For the first time, he admitted he didn't understand Eleanor's dream as well as he thought. And me? I received everything Grandma actually left. Not just the building, not just the archives. Her trust. A month later, Mr. Bell handed me the final page Eleanor wrote. One sentence. The last line of the last story she ever completed. The truth does not belong to whoever speaks first. It belongs to whoever protects it longest. And finally, after months of everyone talking about my grandmother's legacy, we started listening to what she actually wanted. 1 year after Eleanor Whitmore's final story was discovered, the old newsroom opened its doors again, but it was no longer just a newspaper. Not exactly. The printing machines were still there. The old photographs still covered the walls. Grandma's desk still sat beside the window where morning sunlight touched the wood. But now there were new voices inside. Students, writers, neighbors, people who had a story but never thought anyone would care enough to hear it. We called it the Eleanor Whitmore Story House. Because Grandma was right. Everyone has a story. Most people are just waiting for someone to listen. The first week we opened, I found myself sitting at her old desk. For a moment, I felt guilty. Like I was sitting somewhere I didn't belong. Then I noticed something carved underneath the drawer, something I had never seen before. 3 small words. Keep writing, Claire. I laughed. Then I cried. Because somehow, even after everything, Grandma was still answering questions I hadn't asked yet. That was the kind of person Eleanor was. She didn't just prepare you for losing her, she prepared you for finding yourself afterward. People ask me a lot about forgiveness, especially with Vanessa. They wanted a simple answer. Did I forgive her? Did I hate her? Did we become close again? Real life is rarely that clean. For a long time, I was angry, not because of the money, not because of the accusations, because she took memories that belonged to both of us and turned them into a competition. She made me feel like loving Grandma quietly meant it mattered less. But eventually, I understood something. Vanessa spent her whole life trying to become Eleanor. I was lucky enough to simply know her. Those are very different things. 6 months after everything happened, Vanessa came to the story house. No cameras, no announcement, no perfect speech. Just her. She stood in the doorway for almost 10 minutes before walking inside. This place looks exactly like she would have wanted. It was the first time I heard her talk about Grandma without talking about the Whitmore name. Just Grandma. I nodded. I think so too. She looked around at the students working on their projects. The walls filled with ordinary people's stories. The things she once thought were too small to matter. I was jealous of you. I didn't answer, because I already knew. But sometimes people need to say the truth out loud before they can finally hear it themselves. I kept wondering why she trusted you. Her eyes filled with tears. I thought you took my place. I looked at Grandma's typewriter sitting near the window, then back at her. Vanessa, you had a place. You just spent so much time trying to earn a bigger one that you walked away from it. That hurt her. I could see it. But sometimes the truth hurts, because it reaches the part of us that already knows. Vanessa and I did not magically become best friends. Stories do not always end that way. But she started showing up. Once a month at first, then every other week. Not as the face of anything, not as the person giving interviews. She organized boxes, made coffee, helped students record interviews, quiet things. The things nobody applauded. Maybe that was the lesson Grandma wanted her to learn all along. My Uncle Richard changed too. The man who once wanted to sell the building now volunteers every Saturday repairing it. One afternoon, I caught him standing in the archive room, holding an old photograph of Grandma and Grandpa. I spent so many years trying to protect what they built. He wiped his eyes. I forgot to protect why they built it. That sentence stayed with me. Because I think a lot of families lose each other that way. They fight over houses, money, objects, names. They forget that none of those things mean anything without the people and memories attached to them. The most valuable thing Eleanor left me was not the building. It was not the newspaper. It was not the money. It was proof. Proof that love does not always look impressive from the outside. Sometimes love looks like answering the phone, showing up after work, sitting beside someone when there is nothing exciting happening, remembering their favorite tea, listening to the same story 10 times because telling it makes them happy. The world notices big gestures, but people remember who stayed. A few months ago, I found the final recording Grandma made for the memory project. I almost didn't play it. I thought I had heard everything she needed to say. I was wrong. Her voice came through softly, a little weaker than I remembered, but still Eleanor, still certain. If someone is listening to this years from now, I hope they understand something. A pause. You do not protect a legacy by putting someone's name on a building. You protect it by carrying forward the kindness that made the name matter. Then she laughed. That small laugh I missed more than anything. And Claire. Another pause. If you're crying right now, stop. I immediately laughed because I was. You always cared too much about whether you were enough. You were. You always were. I kept that recording. Not hidden away. Not locked in a box. At the Story House, visitors can listen to Eleanor's interviews. Her memories, her lessons, her stories. Because that is what she wanted. Not to be owned. To be shared. Sometimes I still sit at her old typewriter after everyone leaves. I don't write newspaper articles. I write down the stories people tell me. Small stories. Forgotten stories. The kind Grandma loved most. And every time I place a new page into that machine, I remember what she taught me. The loudest person in the room is not always the one telling the truth. The person demanding credit is not always the person who did the work. And the people who love you most are usually the ones helping when nobody else is watching. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person who quietly showed up for someone, while someone else took the credit? Have you ever felt like your kindness went unnoticed? Share your story. Because somewhere out there, someone may be wondering if the little things they do truly matter, and maybe they need the same reminder my grandmother left for me. Real love does not need an audience, and the truth always finds its way back to the people who protected it.